Hello, welcome to Disruptive Technologist webinar here on June 24th, 2020. Hi, I'm Jeff Paul. I'm the webinar director. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Zeotag, an AI-driven video player. And I'm also a member of the think tank for Disruptive Technologists. Welcome to our first summer webinar series on goal setting. We have a great team of professionals and panelists. It's going to give us very insightful thoughts around this, around setting goals that are smart, specific, measurable, achievable, and relevant. It's my delight to introduce one of our hosts tonight, Sep Demeglia from Microsoft, who's going to take it from here. Hey, Sep.
Hello. Hope everyone's doing well today. Like Jeff said, my name is Sep Demeglia. I'm a Microsoft accessibility consultant, and I'm gonna talk through some of the partners that helped make tonight and Disruptive Technologists happen more generally. So to start off, we have McCarter and English, LLP Law. McCarter and English is a firm of approximately 400 lawyers with offices in Boston, Hartford, Stanford, New York, Newark, East Brunswick, Philadelphia, Wilmington, and Washington, D.C. It's been in continuous business for more than 170 years and is among the oldest and largest law firms in America. Its industries are eclectic and include a wide variety of some such as banking and finance, blockchain, smart contracts and digital currencies, cannabis, climate change and renewable energy, consumer financial services, design, fashion and luxury, energy and utilities, equipment leasing, financial institutions, investment management and securities, manufacturing, mid-cap companies, private equity, prop tech, retail, hospitality, and sports law. We also want to thank Dave Soren. He's the managing partner and chair of the Venture Capital and Emerging Growth Companies practice group at McCarter and English, where they address the needs of emerging growth and middle market sector enterprises, investors, directors, and offers to help them achieve their goals sensibly. He's also the chairman of the New York City Disruptive Technologists Council, which is our think tank. Then we also want to give a shout out to the Microsoft Reactor. Microsoft Reactors are neighborhood campuses where developer and startup communities meet, learn, and connect, combining training on the latest technology, community meetups, and events with leaders in the industry. Reactors create an inclusive community for interaction and inspiration. And then just a couple more. We have Zeotag Interactive Video Services. They're a partner of Disruptive Technologies. You can meet the founder, who just spoke, Jeff Paul, and Steve Durham at the usually back of the room, but here on my screen is in the top left. They provide innovative technologies that greatly extend the intelligence, functionality, and monetization options of all forms of web, video, and audio. It's a flagship product. The Zeotag Media Publishing Platform is a robust host-based framework that uses sophisticated metadata to make online media content easily searched, navigated, shared, and ultimately consumed. And then lastly, Lauren wanted to give a shout out, just a hint, fruit infused water. They're the no sugar diet sweeteners, calories, or preservative waters that are non-GMO certified and Whole30 approved. They're vegan and contain no MSG, nuts, soy, or gluten. Normally their bottles can be found at these Disruptive Technologists events. And when we get back to in-person, we expect to see them again. But until then, just maybe can buy them online or wherever you find your groceries or things like that. I'm now going to hand it off to Oliver Christie. He's our moderator for the night, super amazing futurist and artificial intelligence consultant. Oliver, take it away.
Hello, thank you so much. And thank you for tuning in. So tonight we're going to be talking about goal settings. So let's, Jeff, if we could have the next slide. The format, as always, is quite similar. I'll introduce the panel, and then we'll have 3 big questions centered around how to set goals. And then we'll have 10 minutes of Q&A. So if you want to put your burning questions into the Zoom chat, hopefully we'll get around to those at the end. So without further ado, our panel. Next slide, if we could. And one more. Fantastic. So all the way from Ghana is Ramona Wright. She's the co-founder and CEO of WeUp. WeUp, the social gaming platform for good. And you can find out more about her on LinkedIn and also on the link below. And these slides will be shared, so you'll get them afterwards. And next, Roger Osorio, the executive coach and educator at IBM. And IBM doesn't really need an introduction. I think we know who they are. Next, we have Rebecca Costa. We hope she can make it. She's not online yet. Some technical trouble there. Next is Alex Romanovich, the CMO of Tritium DX, a boutique consulting service. And lastly, we have Esther Dyson, the executive founder of Wellville, the impact health non-profit. Without further ado, let's get to our first question. And I'm Oliver Christie, you know me. So the first question, during this unprecedented health pandemic and global protests against racism, how do we possibly plan for the future? 2020 is looking like a very different year. Esther, why don't we start with you? How can we possibly set goals when everything is in flux? Esther, you're on mute at the moment.
Got it. The first goal is to be heard. And so you have to unmute yourself. After that, so people are dying, people are being killed by the police. A lot of horrible things have happened. But at the same time, when things are so terrible, there's a real opportunity not just to fix them, but to change them. Not just to fix the things that happened, but to change the circumstances that created them. Figure out how to help people be less vulnerable to COVID-19. Figure out how to help people have happy childhoods, maternal health, children, education, change the circumstances that the racism, there's a lot of personal implicit bias racism, but there's huge amounts of racism in our system. And those are the things we need to change now while there's a lot of flux and people are beginning to say, well, maybe we should pay workers enough to have a living wage. Maybe we should give more respect to our essential workers. Maybe we should train people to do their jobs rather than just forget about them if they were unlucky enough not to go to good schools. So, I mean, to be honest, those have been the goals of my work for the last 5 years. And, it's nice because now I no longer get stares when I talk about these subjects, both in healthcare and in inequities. So it's, now is the time to be purposeful. Obviously, you need to take care of people who are sick, but you can set serious, purposeful goals and not have people dismiss them as frivolous.
Yes, absolutely.
So,
Jeff, would you be able to change from the slide view so we can see everyone's face, everyone's video?
Sure.
Fantastic, thank you. Ramona, you're over in Ghana at the moment, and your social platform. How can people use that to set goals now, and how does it look? How different does the world look now compared to, say, the beginning of the year?
Yeah, absolutely. Can you all hear me okay?
We can, yes.
Okay, fantastic. I think that our app is actually still under development, but one of the things that we are doing right now is we're actually inviting people to pre-register to be a part of our beta test. But one of the things that we felt was really important with WeUp is to address an inefficiency in the marketplace. people are already, especially in workplaces, taking challenges, jiggering different types of technology, right? So if people want to take a step challenge, if there is an employee group that wants to exercise, or if there is a group that wants to raise money for a particular social issue, our app allows people to form tribes and basically commit to a 30-day challenge and also set an accountability price. And for every day they don't do what they say they're going to do, they would basically put money into almost like a virtual swear jar or piggy bank, and at the end of the 30-day challenge, whichever person commits to the most tasks towards that goal gets the money or can donate it to their charity. And I think in these very challenging times, people need things that are much easier and have the click of a button to address particular issues that they're dealing with, and our app will be able to address some of those inefficiencies in the marketplace. We just did a really big talk to about 200 marketing students at the University of Ghana before the lockdown happened in February. And when you talk about some of the disparities and inequities, one of the things that we've noticed is that if you go into your smartphone and you go into the App Store, what app has, let's say, potentially 1 million users that is designed by an African American or potentially even an African? And so one of the things that we're really trying to do is empower young people to really think big as it relates to technology and really think about the global marketplace as their marketplace and not just a small group. So those are some ways we're trying to address some of these issues.
Are you thinking that this can be used for something like the systemic racism in the US? I mean, it's a very big goal, and it's not an obvious, there's not an obvious solution, but are people starting to come up with goals or ideas around this?
I think you were saying how could they use a product like ours or use technology to address systemic racism?
Mm.
Yeah, I think that, you know, for us, one of the things that we try to look at, one, our goals on our app will initially be curated, but let's say hypothetically there's an opportunity to address systemic racism. I think before you even address that issue, for us, we really have to think about the individual person and their small group. I think one of the challenges when you talk about systemic racism, it's very deep-rooted, right? And so it could take many, many, many years, and people get overwhelmed and very distressed by that opportunity. We believe that if people are able to pursue their purpose in life, the world will become a better place. And so we believe that if there's an opportunity to get people to form small groups and address smaller issues potentially within their own communities, that is a way to start to address the systemic racism on a national, global perspective.
Fantastic, thank you. Well, let's go from small to very large. Roger, how is IBM thinking about and planning goals, or considering what's going on at the moment?
Well, I mean, it's a large organization, so there's definitely different efforts going on in different parts of the organization. However, I think that ultimately the big question to ask is, one is, does the goal change? You know, what were the goals originally? As we going back to the original question of, you know, how does one plan for the future, given everything that's going on? And I think that you decide first, what was my goal originally, and then how does it change given what's happening? For instance, given everything that's happening, we can decide that we want to better align our efforts with one of the challenges that we're going through, so that we can perhaps take that same energy, that same effort, the same technology, and put it in a direction that might help us in, whether it's in terms of systemic racism or issues with preparing properly for global pandemics. You know, obviously we're finding out right now that we weren't adequately prepared. And so I know that, for instance, when that first happened, I started thinking about, okay, wow, so if this were to happen again, even though we had this one thing, we have to figure out what do we do now. I was also thinking, if this happened again, how would I prepare to make sure that I wouldn't be caught off guard and wouldn't be surprised? So for me, part of my future planning includes thinking about how do we prepare for this should it happen again. But as far as IBM is concerned, in terms of, or I would say any leaders at IBM are concerned, I think that one is, what can we do to address some of these? And there's a few campaigns going on and different efforts going on. I think the company is still looking for a unified way, like what's that one thing we could all do? But there are definitely different parts of the world focusing on it in different ways. But the last thing I do want to add about all of this is I think to some extent, we do a lot of the same things when it comes to future planning. But I think in a moment like this, we also have a unique opportunity to reach out to people that normally may not have been accessible to us for working and collaborating with. You know, right now, it's, I'm going back to, like, let's say March and April when we were all locked down, and it was still the first few weeks, maybe 4 weeks in, and everyone was all of a sudden on the same level playing field, for the most part, in the terms of, to some extent, we are now not able to go to all the places we used to go, or we're more locked down or less locked down, but something has happened that has affected all of us in some way. And somebody had reached out to me and said, this is an interesting opportunity now to reach out to someone that normally I'd never have access to. I can just reach out and say, hey, I've got an idea for how we might be able to maybe address one of these challenges. Are you up for it? And that other person who normally might be traveling all around the world, not available to us, is now like, well, I'm just sitting at home on my couch, on Zoom calls all day. And here I am, like, yes, I want to collaborate. I barely know how to use this tech, because normally someone tells me stand here and they turn on the camera and they figure out everything. Now I got to figure out my own camera, figure out my own things. Please help me and I will help you in exchange for that. And so I think there was an opportunity to collaborate on a different level, against those future goals, whether they're same or modified. But I think that the planning now and perhaps the execution could be a little more interesting, where we're all kind of in a similar situation. I think we can work a little bit more together with people we never would have expected to.
Yes, absolutely. Alex, are you seeing something similar with your clients? Are you having the same sort of new conversations around goals? How are you advising them?
Absolutely. And, a lot of the clients were not prepared for something like this. They were not prepared for the COVID pandemic. They were definitely not prepared for and I'm talking about large organizations, they were definitely not as prepared as they should have been for the racism pandemic. And a lot of those things are somewhat run in parallel. And, we'll talk a lot about testing. There was a lot of news about not enough testing. Some people think that we should slow down testing. But at the same time, America is being tested right now on COVID, on something that has been there for a very long time and is literally is breaking the fiber of our society. And those tests, as unfortunate as they may be, and carry, as somebody mentioned before, carry death with it, we as a society, we as a country, need to be constantly tested. So what I advise to my clients is to be prepared and worry about two major things. One is resilience, is to absolutely understand how to become resilient, how to proof your business for resilience. And the second one is relevance. And relevance, those two things actually can be measured. And if your business is not relevant for the times, if your business is not relevant it does not have a high degree of relevancy, that is probably not going to survive, right? So you have to really COVID proof your business. You have to racism proof your business. You have to really really put a lot of metrics in place. If you look at our police departments all across the country, there are no metrics per se, that should be in place. If you any public servant has to take an exam, many have to obtain a license, and those requirements are very strict. We don't see the same thing with people who are not only protecting us, but in many cases abusing us as well. So those are the kinds of things that need to take place. And again, my advice to the clientele, to clients that want to run a sustainable business, is to be resilient and is to be relevant.
Fantastic, thank you. Well, it looks like Rebecca is not going to be able to join us, but Sepp has kindly offered to step in and talk a little bit about his work at Microsoft. So now Microsoft does fantastic things around diversity. It's very thoughtful in the software they create. But how does it set goals? And how do you set goals within your team?
Yeah, so I think Microsoft has certainly come a long way from being kind of very white male dominated back at its inception. And I think a huge part of that is based on the fact that our now CEO was someone from India who worked his way through the ranks over 20 years and kind of grew up in that like Bill Gates Microsoft and learned about all of the different kinds of things that you had to do to kind of climb up the ladder and who and what ways you had to act. And I think that really shaped who he is as a person. And because of it, he's very much loved by a lot of people at the company. Like everyone is always going crazy about Satya whenever they see him speak or whenever he has a town hall. He's always very quick to jump into action with any kind of problem, whether it's internal or something like COVID or the Black Lives Matter protests. He will always kind of set up a town hall kind of immediately, like as soon as possible. Like that week, if something comes out on Monday, by Wednesday, they'll have something on the books. And I think he's kind of diversity and inclusion really personally affects him because outside of being an immigrant, a person of color, he also has a son who is disabled. And so kind of at his core are all of these things that have shaped him up to be a really awesome individual and a really good person to kind of shift Microsoft, this kind of old behemoth, into a more inclusive and diverse company that still definitely has a long way to go, but they recognize that and they're always working and striving to do better. This month and the coming months has been super crazy between Black Lives Matter and COVID-19, and the way that we work as a company has really shifted. Actually, a lot of the world being on our platform really changed kind of the dynamic of how we handle like working virtually, while many of us were using Teams for a long time. It wasn't as widely adopted as it was once the whole world shifted to working remote. Lots of customers that were already Microsoft customers and maybe didn't adopt Teams yet hopped onto it. And with that, there were different kinds of bandwidth limitations and things like that. So being able to adapt to that shift and kind of being able to adjust to this chaos and kind of get organized was really important. And the way that they did that was kind of through goal setting and different kinds of releases. They kind of have this like very agilely DevOps culture across all their product teams. So the way that they do things are kind of breaking up large tasks into smaller ones, setting goals by weeks so that they can constantly have updates and improvements similar to like many other companies, right?
Fantastic. Thank you. Well, so some good news. Rebecca has managed to join us. Rebecca, yes. Welcome. So, sociobiologist and futurist, which is just about the coolest title. Rebecca, welcome. How are you advising clients? What are you advising in terms of goal setting, and now the world has changed?
Well, when these kinds of sea changes occur, you really have two dynamics going on, right? You have complexity that's exponentiating. So you have the velocity of change, the urgency of decision-making, new demands, number of stakeholders, the risk and failure profile. Those are the negative things that are going on. There's some positive things that go on and they exponentiate too. There's innovation and creativity like we haven't seen before. Far less paperwork, right, to get to an actual result. The bureaucracies completely break down. People begin to collaborate because we're troop-dwelling organisms, and genetically we're natural-born collaborators. We collaborate when there's a danger greater than any individual can fend off, which is COVID-19. That's an example. It's also the reason we like movies where aliens are invading the earth. or there's, you know, a meteor that's going to strike us, suddenly all wars come to an end and all nations can get along. So, so all of these things begin to exponentiate, and as a leader, you have a real problem, because while that's all going upward at a very, very rapid pace, what's going downward is the availability of viable data. Historical data really becomes less and less relevant, and what you need is real-time data, and you don't even have the infrastructure to gather the real-time data, and time is ticking, and you've got to make decisions. And so in a case like that, and you know, they say that I'm a global expert on fast adaptation in complex, high failure rate environments. And I laugh at that and I go, that's a mouthful. And you know, if you say that, people move away from you at cocktail parties, right? But it's true. And we're familiar, right? We're familiar with complex, high failure rate environments. We just don't know it. Anybody who invests in a financial portfolio is dealing with a fast changing, highly complex, high failure rate environment. How do we approach that? We certainly don't put all our money on one stock unless we're just an idiot. What we do is we diversify. We make lots of small bets. So it's really important when you're goal setting not to be so singular. In nature, any drive toward singularity is a drive toward extinction. You don't want to, you want to have multiple goals, right? And then you want to see how you're progressing. You want to make small bets. Diversification, right, is a hedge against failure in a fast moving, complex environment. And so we kind of need to think about our goals in terms of diversifying our goals as well, not just our behavior. Does that make sense?
It does, yes. Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you so much. Esther, what are your thoughts on this? Do you take a similar approach to goal setting, or do you do something else? Because there's not one right answer.
I'm not sure what I'll talk about my approach to goal setting. I mean, fundamentally, when you think about goals, there are really two kinds of goals. One is, for a goal to make any sense, it needs to have a person who's accountable for the goal being achieved. It needs to have a fairly concrete definition, and it either needs to have a completion time or it's, you know, a change in state. And the first thing for any goal is to be clear, what is it? You know, is it, I'm going to fix this by next Tuesday? And you know, I don't really like New Year's resolutions because they sort of peter off, as opposed to year-end resolutions. By December 31st, I will have gotten my email down to 0. Yeah, very clear. And you know, you can do a lot of things without clear definition, but if you want to set a goal, it needs to be concrete, specific, accountable, and you need to know whether or not you achieved it. Even if you didn't achieve it, that can be useful information for revising it and setting a new goal. So, I mean, for me, those are, and it gets really hard when you work in areas like health or community improvement, or, you know, dealing with racism. What is it you're actually going to fix? Are you going to fix housing patterns? Are you going to change laws? Are you going to change people's attitudes? Are you going to, you know, but whatever it is you want to do, you should be kind of clear what it looks like. And that, to me, that, you know, that's kind of the basic way to start. And if you can't tell someone else what your goal is, then you can't tell yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, actually, on that very note, let's go to question 2, if we could, Jeff. You want to pull up that slide? So, question 2: how do we balance long-term versus short-term goals? What are we trying to fix? Are we trying to fix something immediate or to the future? Ramona, how are you designing WeUp? Is it short-term goal? Is it long-term goal? How do you balance the two?
So we really are focusing on 30-day challenges. You've heard, I'm sure, the research around that it takes 21 days to form a habit. And so for us, our objective is to get teams of 2 to 4 people to commit to 30-day challenges. They can also commit to as short as 1 week, 2 week, or 3 week challenges. To Esther's point, all goals obviously need a clear definition. They need accountability, but also 2 other things that we found in doing market research in about 31 cities and 27 countries, really to understand human behavior. Goals also need consistency and community. And so we found that by groups having that consistency, the ability to check in, and also having people that they can be accountable to, certainly are great incentives, along with we reward people. So we're paying people to actually
Fantastic. Sorry, Ramona, your audio is dropping out a little bit.
goals, as well as solve social problems they care about.
Thank you. Alex, do your clients think in 30 days? Is it per quarter? Long term or short term?
You know, what's really interesting about long-term, short-term is that, again, COVID, going back to the environment we're in right now, has proven that you could certainly, have long-term goals. If you take digital transformation, for example, a lot of the C-level clients, CIOs, CXOs, CDOs, head of digital, told me that literally overnight they had to turn around and deliver their 2-year or 3-year strategies and goals in 2 to 3 months, because they had to outfit the entire organization or half of the organization to become virtual. They had to deliver training and education. They had to change the business model. They had to do a lot of different things that they otherwise were planning to be implemented within next 2 to 3 years. So again, I'll keep repeating the same thing. Goal setting is great, and I think you have to have the long-term strategies and long-term goals, but the litmus test, the test of those long-term goals is, can they be delivered in short period of time? Can one of those goals be delivered overnight? In case of a quick turnaround, or in the case of quick change of product line, or service line, or something like this. And
thank you. Actually, on that very note, Roger and Sep, you both work for very large companies. How fast were your companies able to change in the short term?
In what kind of way do you mean when you say change?
Yeah, so it feels like the goals of 2020 are changing quite rapidly. How quickly could IBM adapt to a new situation?
Yeah, so I mean, that answer is going to usually vary by organization. I mean, IBM's like a company of many companies. However, the parts that I have the most experience with and the most interaction with, a lot of it depends, I would say, on how clearly the long-term goal is designed and written. If we have a very clear understanding of what that North Star looks like, and something changes, really the only thing that's changing is the how. We know what we're going after, we know why we're going after it. Something happens in the environment, and all of a sudden we have to pivot on the how. Does the goal necessarily change? Perhaps not. I mean, when it comes to business results, I mean, the investors and the markets are not going to be that forgiving at the end of the day. And so if there is some sort of goal that, the company has already made a commitment to, then in that case, we're going to have to just find another way to get there. So I've seen some units where, if they have strong leadership, or at least they have the ability to very quickly change some of the tactics or some of the programming, which in my particular case, I work with developer advocacy, we switched pretty quickly. When we were all of a sudden locked down and could not, much like this organization, this group could not have in-person events, we had to very quickly make the pivot to, all right, so how do we still achieve that goal? We still need to reach external developers. And so we switched to video. We started experimenting with platforms, looking at different things like WebEx, Zoom, eventually landing on Crowdcast. as the, for us, the best solution. And so we started hosting events that way. But that was nice. You know, we are a smaller organization. We can be a little bit more nimble. But I also know that at the same time, there are other organizations much larger with significantly larger investments in a certain way of doing things. No doubt might take them a little bit longer to make those pivots and make those adjustments. They still have the pressure to do it quickly, but you know, just the nature of their particular beast, it may be a little bit different, and they'll have to do it with a little bit more time, perhaps.
Fantastic. Seth, was your experience kind of broadly similar? Does that sound like what's been happening?
Yeah, I think at least for Microsoft, they've kind of pushed a lot of moving virtual for the last couple of years, or the last several years rather. I know when I started at the company about 2.5 years ago, I was working on a fully remote team. I was the only one on the East Coast. My whole team was based in Seattle or California. And the only way that I worked any of them was through Teams calls and virtual meetings and things like that. And a lot of organizations and teams within Microsoft can function similarly, especially in the New York area. We have a lot of employees in the New York metro region, and our office does not have space for all of them, or not even a large percentage of them. All of New York's office was made to be like hoteling or like rotating office space. And that's because inherently we're a technology company. We have a platform where we can work virtually with one another. And so unless we're actually like someone is building something in person that needs a team, they really promote the idea of like turning on your video, working with teams virtually, allowing for a work-life balance that works best for the person, whether it's working from home, working from a WeWork, or in office experience. So for like a lot of orgs and my team directly, it wasn't a huge shift. Most of my team of about 200, I want to say like 80% of them were already working from remote. The shift wasn't so much about how do we adapt to this new technology shift, because we were already doing it, but it was rather how do we adapt to the different circumstances around us. I was telling Jeff earlier today that like for me, working from home wasn't that different. What was different was that now I had 4 other people working from home with me, and kind of the ins and outs of getting to know like how to like take meetings effectively, and how to make sure that the noise in the background isn't going to be conflicting with other people's noises. But I definitely mirror Roger's points.
Yeah, on that exact point, Jeff, if we could put up question number 3. So question.
I was able to segue.
Yes, no, it's perfect. Question number 3 is, how do we ensure goals are met? What are the practical things that organizations and individuals can do to make real change actually happen? Rebecca, how do you suggest, you know, what tools do you use, what approaches do you use that to make sure that goals actually happen?
Well, I'm going to go back to what I said earlier, because I think maybe I was confusing and not as clear as I should be. So I'm going to take a run at it again. In a complex environment, diversification is important. So let's say you have a goal and it's going to be complicated to get to that goal, right? It's going to take a real focus and a real effort. We need to think more like venture capitalists, right? We need to make lots of small bets. And some of the things are going to help us get to that goal. And some things that we try and we do are not going to advance us toward the goal. In other words, we have to have a little bit of an understanding that there's going to be some failure built in there. You can't, getting to goals is not a straight line. It's more like a zigzag. And anybody who's had a fruitful career will tell you they didn't just wake up one morning and say, I'm going to be that thing. Right, I'm going to be the president of IBM, and then just walk straight to that goal. It doesn't work that way. And so we have to understand that back to what Esther was saying a little bit earlier about racism. You know, you fix the laws, you fix the police department, you fix culture, right? You have to hit it on many fronts, starting in education at an early age. And some of the things you do are going to produce a result and help you get there. That's what I mean by diversification. But let me also say that many of the things you do are not going to be fruitful. COVID-19 is a perfect example, right? What is our goal? It's to get control of the disease so that people won't die from it. So what are we doing? Well, we're doing a lot of things, from the CARES program to masks, to hand washing, to sanitizing surfaces, to hydroxychloroquine, which early on we went, oh yeah, that doesn't work. So that one get bailed on. And then we have some longer term goals, which are vaccines, right? And other plasma therapies and those kinds of things that are longer term and further out. But we did a lot of things in the short run, from lockdowns to financial aid to SBA loan programs, rent forgiveness. We marched on a lot of fronts. And guess what? As we go backwards now, we know that a lot of those things didn't do anything for anybody. They weren't really helpful. This is what I mean when you're going toward your goal. You have to try a lot of things, and most importantly, fail fast and forgive yourself for failing. Don't fire people or become a punitive culture, but understand that in order to get to a unique goal and a difficult goal, and hopefully you will choose one, you are going to, it is just likely that you're going to try many things that will not work. Forgive yourself, move on.
Fantastic, thank you. Esther, what is your approach to, or what have you seen works for goal setting?
So most goals are accomplished not by an individual. I mean, there's, I'm going to run more or something, but they're accomplished by teams. And a team needs to work together. How do you get that to happen? First of all, the team needs to agree. Ultimately, there needs to be a decision made, and people who might not have, somehow people need to understand why they're doing this. Maybe they're doing it only because the team has decided, even if they're kind of not sure it's the right goal, but they need to be motivated. They need to understand, I'm doing this because the team needs me to do it. I'm doing it because I need to hold up my part of the team. We need to do it because we need to make the fourth quarter. We need to do it because our leader wants it. We need to do it because our buddies want it. But ideally, they also want to do it because they agree with the goal. But one way or another, you have to get that buy-in. I'll just really short, it's a long story, but I'll make it short. Southwest Airlines, door closes, stewardess gets up and says, we ain't got no peanuts. Now we can sit here for 15 minutes and catering will bring them peanuts over, but first I'm gonna take a vote. And of course, everybody says, we don't need no stinking peanuts, let's just go. And they had bought in to getting the plane off the ground. If the stewardess had let the plane go and then told them afterwards there were no peanuts, they would have been really annoyed. But they made this group decision and the plane got off the ground. And that's how you get people to buy in, and that's how you actually achieve goals.
Fantastic. Well, it's a great story. And I think quite relevant now. Ramona.
I wanted to add to that, if I may, if you all can hear me okay.
Yes, we can. Fantastic.
Okay, great. I think one of the things that we talked about in prep for this call is the importance of distinguishing values versus goals. And I think that now more than ever, because of COVID-19, because of obviously all of the uprisings all over the world addressing systemic racism, many companies are grappling with their values. And so before I think a company or a team can establish what their goals are, they probably need to really reevaluate what are their values as not only a company, but as a team. And then to Esther's point, making sure that there's complete buy-in from the team or the company around those values. And then I think another important thing is, what is the intentional outcome, and what are the evaluation methods and tools that will be used to discern if the goal truly is not only achievable, but if they have actually achieved the goal within the time frame that's been set.
Fantastic, thank you. Let's go to both Roger and Alex. Values versus goals, which you think is most impactful? Which do you think actually makes the change happen?
So I'll take a stab at that first. So as far as I think that values play a critical role in terms of perhaps how we even set the goal, or what goals we set in the first place. They help guide our thinking as far as, what's important to us. In a world where there's so many opportunities and so many different goals that we could be pursuing, we need to find a way to narrow this thing down. What's important to us? What's important to our organization, to the people in our organization, so that we can all get aligned around something that will probably have more purpose behind it. And so I think that values really, to some extent, will help us make the decision on which are the goals that are most important. And then, going back to that powerful third question about, how do you just get those, how do you get those goals done? How do you ensure that they get done? The key is really on measurement. You have to measure them regularly. Often we talk about these ideas of New Year's resolutions and things like that, and we usually check up on those perhaps at the end of the year when it's already too late, and either you got it or you didn't. But you check in as frequently as possible to make sure that you're making progress. Whatever you check, whether it's monthly, you'll do way better if you check monthly. If you check weekly, even better. Daily, you're going to get even better at it. You're more likely to move and make progress more regularly and get there more quickly. And, that ties into something Alex talked about earlier when he was talking about, time too. Once you set those goals, how do you get there even more quickly? But you got to measure daily. If you want to get there quickly, measure daily. If you really want to get there quickly, measure hourly if you have to. It depends on the nature of your industry and the nature of the work. But if there's progress that's being made hourly, then check hourly. But you really got to check. But if you take too much time in between those checkpoints, it's going to be a lot harder to make that progress, and you're not going to really give yourselves the best chances of getting that goal.
Alex, are you finding that's the same for you?
No, I would definitely agree with Ramona and Roger in terms of the creating or enhancing your value system, and then supporting that value system with goals both long-term and short-term. I was listening to a great interview with the governor of Rhode Island, who partnered with Salesforce, partnered with CVS, a number of other organizations in the state to provide the data points, to provide help to those who need it, from the testing standpoint, and creating metrics that could be measured, and so forth. But it has to be grounded. All of that has to be grounded in some kind of a value system that basically says, look, human life is important to us. Human life is important to us no matter what. And, the law of capitalism do not work when the human life is at stake. If that's an example of a value, then the goals are very clear. The goals are very clear in terms of execution. In America, we're a very execution-driven society, and it seems that it should be fairly easy for us to implement those goals, even in the times of stress. Well, obviously, we're being tested, 5 ways to Sunday, and I would agree with Ramona and Roger that goals can be long-term and short-term, but the value system has to be present.
Rebecca, I'm guessing you assume that the values are important, but which values and whose values?
Well, I might have a little bit of a different take on this. The values of an organization originate from the founders, and they rarely, they morph a little bit, but they rarely change. You look at the values of a Walmart. It was reasonable products at the lowest possible price, right? For the for a certain type of consumer. And while Walmart has changed and You've gone from superstores to smaller stores to curbside delivery and off, you know, and changed many of their executions. Whether it's Apple Computer or Walmart or Amazon, the values of the founder, they form culture, and that culture persists. And so, from my standpoint, I can see Esther might not agree with me completely, but from my observation, the values originate from the founders, and the execution of those values may differ, but that's where the values tend to come from.
Fantastic. Esther, what's been your experience?
She's shaking her head. She doesn't agree with me on anything,
No,
I think. Esther, you
love,
gotta agree with me on something.
I love everything you said, with this exception. I mean, take a look at Google. I mean, in Silicon Valley, you start with the values of the founders, but then the metabolism of Silicon Valley takes over, and you get investors pushing for exponential growth. You get what happened to Facebook. Basically, it's like somebody with good values who gets addicted, and instead of getting addicted to a substance, they get addicted to this exponential growth, and it perverts a lot of what they do. And it's pernicious, and we're seeing it happen in so many different areas. And it's the fundamental sickness of our age. We don't pay people.
I can agree with that. I can agree with that, because I do think that there are times where a company gets hijacked, right? And that's I don't know. I'm going to sound like a romantic, and I don't mean to, but it's a sad thing. It's a very sad thing when the values that allowed the founders to grow the company and to become relevant and to share what they knew and their progress and their brilliance with all of us, when that gets hijacked, it's really a tragic thing.
I think it's interesting you mentioned both Walmart and Google. So Google famously got rid of their unofficial slogan, "Do you know evil?" But then on the other hand, Walmart increased their minimum wage. And I know from talking to the data science team that they're very, very careful about what technologies they roll up to be bias free. We've got a question from Lisa Franson, and this is to the whole panel. When you set longer term goals, how do you know these goals should be changed? In other words, are they when they're no longer the right goals? And do you have techniques or practices you use to make sure these goals are still relevant? And this is to anyone on the panel.
Well, that sounds like a great app. We'll just use, sorry.
Oh, no,
I was joking, so I'll answer, and then you can give a real answer. I mean, just, use some AI and make an app, and it will tell you, right? Go ahead, please answer.
Thanks, Esther. So, when it comes to long-term goals, I mean, they definitely can change, and they will likely change. There's a couple of things that could happen. They could evolve a little bit, or they might just become, they are no longer interesting or relevant to you and to your mission. Perhaps your values have changed a little bit. Perhaps your mission has changed a little bit, or even your vision. And if those things are changing and things don't seem so interesting, or a particular goal doesn't seem so interesting, it's better to actually just cut it loose at that point than, just trying to push yourself to this finish line that's no longer that relevant to you. Often when I work with my clients, I simply, through questioning, challenge them so that they could really think about, does this still matter to me? Is this still relevant to me at this point in time? And I always help them feel at least comfortable enough to be able to say, no, it's not relevant anymore to me. Things have changed, and I'm actually more interested in something else right now. Sometimes it's a moment like now, what's going on, that might inspire a new long-term vision, a new long-term goal. And that would be the occasion right there where you might realize that this is not the right goal for me anymore. I want to switch and make an adjustment. As far as practices, it's really checking in periodically. So when I work with my coach, I have my own coach. He usually checks in with me, it's about quarterly, where he'll bring this up, where it's like, let's look over your longer term goals, and let's just make sure that they're still relevant to you. And if they're not, let's talk about that. Let's see how they need to adjust. So for me, it's quarterly that I usually check, but some people might want to check them monthly. It really just depends on how things are changing for you. I think if I was younger, if I was in my 20s, perhaps mid 20s or late 20s, they'd probably change a little more frequently. And so I might check in maybe monthly, you know, but right now quarterly seems to do it. I don't see too many changes even quarterly, but never hurts to just give it that quick check-in.
Fantastic. Actually, we're almost out of time. So one very fast yes or no question to each of the panelists. Do you have a coach or a serious mentor? Ramona, do you use a coach?
I think
Oh,
we
we lost
just lost
Ramona.
Ramona.
I think we've lost her. Alex, how about you? Do you use a coach?
Absolutely, and I'll have a coach when I'm, you know, 55 and when I'm 85. You never stop learning.
Fantastic. How about you, Seth? Is this something you use?
Yep, I have a coach as well. I've had one since I was a freshman in university, and I plan to continue. Kind of mirroring Alex's, you know, never too old to learn.
Fantastic. Esther, how about you? How do you move forward?
So I don't have a coach, but I've had two things I founded, and in both cases I had a CEO, and I made sure that they were people who would tell me if I was being stupid, and it's been wonderful.
Fantastic. And Rebecca, last words from you.
My dad, and I'm stuck with him, and he has no problem telling me when I'm doing something stupid.
Fantastic. Well, wise words there. Well, thank you all so much indeed. Thank you to the whole panel. And I'll now hand back to Lauren, or is it Jeff?
Yeah, we're going to go right back to Lauren. Wow, what a session. Jam-packed full of great content. Thanks, everybody. Hey, Lauren, back to you.
Just wanted to say thanks, everyone, for coming. This will be live, posted on all of our other media platforms, including our web, our social media network, our YouTube channel, everything. But please come back in 1 week, 6 o'clock next Wednesday, and we'll do a fireside chat where we're going to be answering questions from the audience. Same people. So if you can email me, lauren.keeson@gmail.com, or just go to the Meetup site and you can click on organizer and send me those questions. We'd love to get them, and we'll see you next week. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Take care, everyone. Cheers.